Good afternoon. The first item of business this afternoon is portfolio questions. The first portfolio is Constitution, External Affairs and Culture and Parliamentary Business. Members wishing to ask a supplementary question should press the request to speak buttons during the relevant question. There's quite a bit of demand, so brevity in questions and responses would be appreciated. And I call first question number 1, Carol Mochy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what it is doing to protect the ongoing viability of local and regional museums and galleries. Cabinet
Secretary Angus Roberts. Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thanks to Carol Mochan for her question. While it is for locally elected council representatives to make decisions on how best to deliver services in their local communities, the Scottish Government recognises the significant challenges the museums and galleries sector is facing. The Scottish Government is developing a museums capacity and support programme in partnership with Museums Galleries Scotland and the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and that will invest £4 million in 2025-26, taking a collaborative and strategic approach to enable positive change across the sector, ensuring that these vital organisations have the resilience to continue to deliver for Scotland's communities and for the nation as a whole.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Across South Scotland, there are a number of important cultural artefacts that museums do not have the funding to maintain. If this relatively small amount of funding is not found, these pieces will have to go into storage away from the public in order to protect it. This will further decrease visitor numbers. Is this government sleepwalking into the terminal decline of Scottish culture anywhere other than in our major cities? Or does the plan the Cabinet Secretary mentioned support culture within our towns and villages?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm happy to confirm that this is a Scotland-wide programme. Carol Mochan has raised concerns about some specific artefacts. I'm not aware of those, but I'd be very grateful if she could let me know. I would want to look very closely about those and understand if there's anything additionally that I can do to support their retention and their display in the region that she represents.
And supplementary, Evelyn Tweed.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. Thanks to record investment from the Scottish Government, I note that earlier this month, Museums Galleries Scotland announced new grants funding of £2.4 million for 2025. Can the Cabinet Secretary speak to how this funding will help maintain and revive museums and galleries for communities across Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
We value the support that Museums Galleries Scotland offer the sector, and due to the increased investment from the Scottish Government in the 25-26 budget this year, Museums Galleries Scotland have opened the Small Grants Fund to non-accredited museums, increasing support opportunities to more organisations across Scotland. And Museums Galleries Scotland have also bolstered their Repair and Adaptation Fund, which will support capital costs that directly increase the resilience of museums or improve accessibility through projects that address capital repair issues and adaptations. Further details on the full range of support available through Museums Galleries Scotland is available on their website.
Question 2, Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on plans to increase funding for local museums and heritage centres, including the Summerlee Museum of Scottish Industrial Life in Coatbridge.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government values our local museums and heritage centres, which is why we have increased Museums Galleries Scotland's funding from £2.7 million in 2024-25 to £4.27 million in 25-26. As well as continuing to support Historic Environment Scotland. These organisations deliver direct and indirect support to local museums and heritage centres across Scotland by providing expert advice as well as grant schemes, details of which can be found on their respective websites, and I would encourage Mr McGregor to share this information with the Summerlee Museum. We're also collaboratively developing a strategically focused brand new £4 million museums capacity and support programme with sector partners.
Fulton McGregor.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. This week I will be present at 2 culturally significant events being held at Summerlee. On Friday I will attend the annual International Workers' Memorial Day, and on Saturday I will be speaking at the opening of Ships Ahoy Scottish Maritime Heritage Exhibition along with Paul Sweeney, MSP. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that such events highlight the essential role local museums play in preserving Scotland's industrial and maritime heritage, and that increased funding is needed to support and sustain them within our communities?
Cabinet Secretary.
I do agree that such events highlight the essential role that local museums play in preserving Scotland's renowned industrial and maritime heritage, whilst delivering significant benefits to communities across Scotland. As already mentioned, this is why we've increased funding to Museums Gallery Scotland from £2.7 million to £4.27 million this year. In addition to this, the Scottish Government is developing a museums capacity and support programme in partnership with Museums Gallery Scotland and National Lottery Heritage Fund, where we'll be investing £4 million in 25-26, and I'm pleased to say that this increased funding will offer additional support to the sector as a whole.
Question 3, Alec Rowley.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government what action it has taken to support young people to access the creative industries.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government has a long-standing history of supporting youth arts programmes. This includes the Youth Music Initiative and Systema Scotland. Both will receive a 3% uplift in 2025-26, taking annual investment to £9.79 million and £2.68 million respectively. We're also providing £12 million to local authorities to support free instrumental music tuition, and Screen Scotland's groundbreaking film and screen education programme is supporting Scotland's next generation of filmmakers. We're also calling on the UK Government to negotiate a youth mobility agreement with the European Union to ensure that young people can access the international opportunities of the creative industries.
Alec Rowley.
My question is really to ask the Cabinet Secretary what discussions does he and his department have with education, training and skills and the Education Department. Fife College, for example, has about a third of its provision in the creative industries sector. The Scottish Funding Council has announced a rise for colleges of 2.6%. However, on further looking into this, it does look like it's broken down across the country, and that Fife College would only be in receipt of an increase that looks like a teaching grant of 1.6%. Therefore, my understanding is that the college grant that is being offered to Fife is in fact a real terms cut, despite the fact a third of their provision is in the creative industries. Do you have discussions with colleagues in other parts of government to ensure that these colleges, which are crucial for the advancement of creative industries and supporting people into them?
Cabinet Secretary.
The first part of Mr Rowley's question was about, are there discussions that take place with education colleagues about the provision of support and education and training in relation to the creative industries? And as I mentioned, they're specifically about the rollout of the screen sector element of the curriculum right across Scotland, which have a positive benefit, and Fife too is an example of just that. Mr Rowley has drawn my attention to a specific issue in the region that he represents. I'd be grateful if he can forward the details of that to me, so that I might be able to reply to him in a more considered and broader way to the specific part, second part of the question that he asked me.
A couple of brief supplementaries. First, Willie Coffey.
Thank you. Could the Cabinet Secretary advise how the Access All Art Fund will continue to support the creative ambitions of children and young people across Scotland? And could you provide an update on some of the projects underway as a result of the 2025 allocations?
Cabinet Secretary.
The Access All Arts Fund is supported by Creative Scotland and the National Lottery, and I'd be happy to put Mr Coffey in contact with the Youth Arts team at Creative Scotland to learn more about it. Scottish Government funding directly supports the Youth Music Initiative, which includes multi-art form strands, and will receive a budget uplift this year, taking our annual investment to £9.78 million. Within this, we will be working with YouthLink, amongst other partners, to ensure young people from all backgrounds have access to inspirational, creative opportunities.
Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. A recent survey of participants for the Access All Arts Fund, which benefits children and young people, found that 92% of recipients experienced a positive impact on their mental health and well-being, while 82% had receiving funding helped them overcome barriers to the arts. Given the importance of this funding and enable children and young people to flourish within the arts and creative sector, what action is put in place to ensure that that funding continues into coming years? Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm delighted to see Mr Stewart's welcome for the positive impact that arts learning, arts teaching and the participation in cultural life has for young people. We have raised the culture budget in Scotland by the biggest single increment ever, and the intention is to continue the growth of that budgetary support for the culture sector. I would welcome his support in that. I note, of course, he voted against the budget, so I will work very hard to persuade him next year that he should vote for the continuing increases in culture funding that the Scottish National Party is delivering in government.
Question 4, Maggie Chapman.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on how its international development work is supporting the humanitarian response in Palestine.
Cabinet Secretary.
The First Minister yesterday announced an additional £300,000 to support humanitarian aid efforts in the Middle East through the Disasters Emergency Committee Appeal and Scottish charities SCIAF and Mercy Corps. This is in addition to our previous contribution of £250,000 to the DEC Appeal, SCIAF and Mercy Corps, as well as £750,000 for the UNRWA Appeal in November 2023. This funding has helped to deliver life-saving food, shelter and medical assistance for people across Gaza and the wider region. Humanitarian needs continue to escalate, and the DEC Appeal has so far raised £3.8 million in Scotland, and the Scottish public can continue to make a donation to the DEC Appeal.
Maggie Chapman.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his response. He will be aware that, in addition to the important support he outlines, there are many other organisations that have made contributions, sometimes in kind, to support those trying to cope with occupation and genocide. One example is the International Fire and Rescue Association, a Scottish-based charity who has donated a fire appliance to Dundee's twin city, Nablus. But it's been impounded by Israeli military customs since last July. Is there anything the Cabinet Secretary can do to press for the release of this appliance so that it can be used as intended to aid communities in Nablus?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think Maggie Chapman is right to raise the fact that there is a very broad range of Scottish charitable and third sector organisations that want to assist Palestinian people in their time of great need and distress at the present time. It's not just the fire engine that she's talked about that is being stopped from entering Gaza. Much of the aid effort that the international community would wish to provide to people in Gaza is not getting through either. So I will use every and any opportunity that I can to add my voice and the Scottish Government's voice to appeal to authorities everywhere that have a locus in this to allow aid to get through to help the people of Gaza.
Supplementary, Neil Bibby.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Following the previous portfolio questions and in terms of the Scottish Government's international development work, the Cabinet Secretary stated in a letter to me that none of the grants awarded under the Climate Justice Fund have gone to non-profit entities or gone to for-profit entities. However, the 2024 annual report for one of the 3 organisations who received money from the Climate Justice Fund appears to show net profits and proposed dividends. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary to look into this again, and in the meantime can he tell the Chamber what his definition of non-profit is?
The supplementary question doesn't relate directly to the initial question, but is anything the Cabinet Secretary...
I will try my best, Presiding Officer. We are very careful to make appropriate decisions in relation to the humanitarian response in Palestine. But as Mr Bibby has drawn my attention to, there is wider funding that is provided beyond disasters and emergency relief. I will look closely at the point that he makes. I will write back to him. I will look at this. But I'm sure, Presiding Officer, you would wish me to focus my remarks on the humanitarian response in Palestine, which I have done already.
Thank you. Question 5, Emma Roddick.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government how it is ensuring that its work to support and promote Scotland's art and culture is geographically spread and representative.
Cabinet Secretary.
We are very proud that our record funding to Creative Scotland this year supports a wide range of exciting new entrants to the multi-year funding programme, serving smaller, often rural communities. This includes Glen Ken's Community and Arts Trust in Dumfries and Galloway, the Lith in the Highlands, who join existing members of the geographically diverse cohort such as the Devon projects in Aberdeenshire and Dance North in Murray. This demonstrates that we are committed to ensuring our support for the sector is distributed across Scotland, reaching the communities who need it most.
Thank you. The Highlands and Islands has a lot to be proud of in the realm of arts and culture, but I am aware that many organisations often feel they're at a disadvantage because it's not as easy for them to mix with officials or funders when informal conversations about what people are doing well often happen in the Central Belt. Could you go into more detail on how the Scottish Government ensures opportunities are available across the country? And can I reiterate my very warm invitation for him to come to Eden Court and hear for himself about the role that theatre plays, not only in fostering local talent and promoting arts and culture in Inverness and the Highlands, but ensuring that it is firmly embedded in the wider community?
Secretary.
Can I give Emma Roddick the assurance that the voices, the views, the needs, interests, concerns and expectations of arts organisations throughout Scotland, regardless of where they are important to the Scottish Government and are important to Creative Scotland, where we have strategic partnerships, where we have roundtables, where we have ongoing dialogue. I am very keen to make sure that everybody that can take part, wants to take part, is able to do just that. As a parliamentarian who represented a North of Scotland constituency for a long time, I know how important the Eden Court Theatre is, and I would wish to put on the record that all organisations that meet established criteria are considered equally for funding, irrespective of interactions that they may have in person with Creative Scotland. Meeting the criteria will be the sole factor that determines a funding decision, and I would urge the Eden Court Theatre to get in touch with Creative Scotland directly if they have any concerns.
Brief supplementary, Pam Gossel.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Tower Digital Arts Cinema in my region of Helensdra was saved from closure last month due to the hard work and determination of campaigners. The facility has provided regular cinema screenings and has served as a venue for concerts, election, hustings and other community events since 2014. The potential closure of the venue would be devastating for the local community, who are limited in terms of cultural venues. Will the Cabinet Secretary congratulate the Save the Tower campaign group for its hard work, and can he outline what more the Scottish Government is doing to support cultural facilities in the West Scotland region?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm absolutely delighted to join the member in commending the campaigners. I think one of the underreported developments in recent years were the degree of financial distress that has been felt in the cultural sector here and elsewhere in the United Kingdom has been existential for many, is that a great number of these important cultural venues have been saved from closure, and we should all be very grateful to those who have been involved in the campaigns to retain them. I can give Pam Gossel the assurance that both I and colleagues in Creative Scotland are absolutely seized of making sure that the funding streams that are available can go to venues and organisations around the country. That has already been rolled out in part through the multi-annual year programme of Creative Scotland, and other funding streams are also available.
And even more briefly, Beatrice Wishart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Visit Scotland National Events Funding Programme aims to support events out with the Central Belt. However, one of the eligibility criteria requires more than 1,000 in-person attendees. This is an unreasonable ask for many smaller rural and island communities. So what can the Scottish Government do to enable a review of this requirement to ensure that smaller island and rural communities can access the fund?
Cabinet Secretary.
In replying briefly, Presiding Officer, Visit Scotland and the National Events Strategy falls in the orbit of another ministerial colleague, but I will make sure that the point that she has raised is passed on to my departmental colleagues, because the point that she makes, of course, is entirely relevant for smaller or parts of the country that are further away from the major centres of population.
Okay, question 6, Willie Rennie.
To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with EU member states regarding Scotland's alignment with EU policies in light of the election of President Trump.
Cabinet Secretary.
Regardless of the outcome of any US presidential election and following the strong deregulatory impact of Brexit, the Scottish Government has always had a policy of aligning with the European Union where it is possible and meaningful to do so. In Scotland, we will continue to pursue this alignment across a full range of devolved policy areas. This will allow us to protect and advance the high standards that our fellow Europeans benefit from, thanks to effective EU regulation, and will also keep up close to legislation in place across the member states of the European Union.
Willie Rennie.
I would agree with him, but I think it's even more important following the election of President Trump, considering the volatile effects that his leadership has had. Now, it's reported that President Trump will be visiting Scotland in September. So what plans has the Cabinet Secretary got for that visit, engagement with President Trump, and what is he going to say to President Trump?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I can confirm to Mr Rennie that I don't have any scheduled meetings with President Trump, that I may raise the issues that he's outlining, and there are also no plans in place and a time agreed for any potential state visit, which is a matter for the United Kingdom government. The points that he raises, though, about the challenges that have been thrown up in recent weeks and months do make it much more challenging for all of us to make sure that we can protect our economic interests and free trade. And that is something, going back to the question, Presiding Officer, that we will remain in dialogue with our European Union friends, neighbours and allies. And it's one of the jobs that Scotland House in Brussels does an excellent amount of work on.
Question 7, Karen Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on its strategy to further the case for Scottish independence in light of the reported polling indicating a majority in support.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government believes the best outcomes for Scotland will come if we ensure that more of the decisions about Scotland are taken by and for the people of Scotland. The First Minister is setting out a vision of a country free from child poverty, with higher living standards and with the powers of independence to create the kind of Scotland that we know is possible. We remain committed to publishing a final overview independence paper to give people in Scotland the information that they need to make an informed choice about their constitutional future.
Madam.
I thank him for that answer. People in Scotland are recognising the democratic deficit that we face. Given this growing public awareness, can the Scottish Government provide an update on how it intends to build on that momentum and continue informing the public through its civic engagement and public education about the opportunities of Scotland becoming an independent country?
Secretary.
Well, I agree with the member, and I think that it's important to say that the Scottish Government has set out and will continue to set out the opportunities that will come from being an independent country. We've set out our plans for the economy of an independent Scotland, for rejoining the European Union, for a new constitution with democracy, rights and equality at its heart, and for an inclusive, welcoming approach to citizenship, as well as a migration system that meets Scotland's needs. The First Minister is also setting out our 4 priorities for government through a series of speeches, and will continue to speak to the issues that matter to the public so that people can have an informed choice about the future options that are available to them all.
Question 8, Christine Graham.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will change its policy position in relation to an independent Scotland seeking to rejoin the EU in light of the potential impact of US tariffs on the UK and the EU.
Cabinet Secretary.
Global economic volatility following President Trump's announcements on tariffs reinforces more than ever the importance of Scotland having the security, the stability and the opportunity that comes with EU membership. The EU is a rules and values-based organisation with a single market of around 450 million citizens. So amongst present global uncertainties, the importance of sustaining a Europe of countries working together for peace, prosperity and progress has never been greater. And for these reasons, we are profoundly committed to Scotland achieving membership of the European Union as an independent nation.
Christine Graham.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary very much for his answer, with which I agree, because given the recent analysis by the Office of the Chief Economic Advisor, it is estimated that Brexit trade barriers could impact Scotland's economy by £4 billion. And with the unreliability almost day-to-day of the Trump pronouncements and tariffs, does the Cabinet Secretary agree we were better in the EU than out?
Secretary.
Indeed, I agree. Brexit has been a huge backwards step, which has sharply reduced access to our greatest international trading market, while bureaucracy, costs, delays and complexity have been imposed on Scottish businesses. Recent Scottish Government modelling shows that leaving the European Union is estimated to reduce Scottish GDP by at least £4 billion in the long run, measured in today's GDP compared to continued EU membership. The Scottish Government is doing what it can to mitigate the damage of a Brexit that Scotland didn't vote for, to minimise divergence with the European Union and to ease Scotland's return to the EU as an independent country at the earliest opportunity.
Briefly, Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I was hoping we were going to get some Brexit realism there from Christian Graham, but sadly we're disappointed on this occasion. But I wonder if I can ask the Cabinet Secretary if he would agree with me that with the impact we are already seeing of US tariffs on Scottish exports, good relations with the US have never been more important. And I wonder if he shares my concern at the potential closure of the US consulate in Edinburgh as being mooted by the State Department. Would the Cabinet Secretary acknowledge the excellent work that the consulate has done over many years? And would he join with me in calling on the US State Department to reconsider any plans to close that very vital resource?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I join Murdo Fraser in paying tribute to the work of the Consulate of the United States of America in Edinburgh? They have done a tremendous job over the more than 200 years that there has been a consulate in Scotland. Since 1798 there has been diplomatic relations between US diplomats and Scotland, and we very much value all of that. Indeed, I met with the Consul General, Catherine Porter, this morning. Of course, these are decisions for the State Department and the United States administration, but I would just observe that in recent years we have seen a significant increase in consular representation in Scotland, and I think many people would be extremely disappointed if the United States were not part of that wider consular family of the international community based in Scotland.
Thank you. That concludes portfolio questions on Constitution, External Affairs and Culture. There will be a brief pause before we move to the next portfolio to allow front benches to change. Okay, the next item of business is portfolio questions on justice and home affairs. A reminder to members that questions 4 and 8 have been grouped together, so I'll take the supplementaries on those questions after the substantive questions have been asked. Members looking to ask a supplementary should press the request to speak buttons during the relevant questions. Again, there's quite a bit of demand for supplementary questions, so the usual appeal for brevity in both the questions and the answers. I call question number 1, Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government regarding any implications for its work on tackling rural crime and preventing the theft and resale of machinery in Scotland, when it first made aware of the proposals of the Equipment Theft Prevention Act 2023, which applies to England and Wales.
Minister Siobhan Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I thank the member for the question. And I know this is an issue that the member has raised before with her interest in rural crime. It was previously thought that the Scottish Government officials became aware of this MP's private members' bill in May 2023. Ministers have now been made aware that there was some limited contact from the UK Government at official level back in November 2022, which was not highlighted again until May 2023.
Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I thank the Minister for her answer, because previously she had told me that the Government were only informed of its existence in May 2023 and giving insufficient time to fully consider the implications for the bill in Scotland. However, she has just confirmed, and I'm pleased to say, that the Home Office contacted the Scottish Government several months before, in February of that year, to discuss the Act and the policy position in Scotland. So instead of agreeing to discuss the Act, the SNP wrote back to say that they did not have any comments to offer, which I find extraordinary. So given the threats of cross-border criminal movement and farm machinery, which impacts many farmers in the Scottish borders, will the Minister engage urgently with the UK Government to ensure we can replicate that Act as soon as possible?
Minister.
Thank you. This legislation has not been implemented down south in England and Wales yet, and my officials have been told that the Home Office are drafting the regulation, but they cannot, at this stage, the Labour Government cannot indicate a time frame for this. I do know that my officials have requested updates from the Home Office as to its progress, and once it's implemented, its effectiveness in mitigating equipment theft before considering potential implications for Scotland and what options might be available for Scottish ministers in terms of replicating the measures here.
And briefly, Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Many of us across this chamber recognise the serious threats which rural crime poses on the communities which we represent. Can the Minister please outline how the Scottish Government is delivering on its commitment to continue to work with Police Scotland and other partnership against rural crime partners to develop and implement strategies to combat those perpetrating rural crimes such as equipment theft?
Minister.
Thank you. The Scottish Government recognises the harm caused to individuals, communities and businesses which has been caused by rural crime. We fully support the efforts of the Scottish Partnership Against Rural Crime, known as SPARC, in aiming to tackle rural crime across the country. SPARC is chaired by Police Scotland and draws together key organisations, stakeholders from across the justice and rural sector to provide a robust multi-agency approach to rural crime. The most recent SPARC update from January this year shows that the incidents of rural crime and monetary costs of such incidents are both down on the previous point of last year.
Good question to Tim Eagle.
To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to reports that the prisoners released under the Prisoners Early Release Scotland Act 2025 included some who had broken prison rules.
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, the Prisoners Early Release Scotland Act 2025 now allows most short-term prisoners to be released from prison after serving 40% of their sentence instead of 50%. A breach in prison rules does not form part of the exclusion or eligibility criteria for a person's release from custody, as this process of using the prison rules to amend a person's liberation date ceased in 2001.
Tim Eagle.
Figures uncovered by the Scottish Conservatives revealed that almost a fifth of prisoners released as a result of the SNP's early release scheme broke prison rules while serving time. Our communities are rightly worried about the heightened risks of reoffending that come with that. Does the Minister agree with me that it is important we don't have a perceived soft-touch justice system? And what's the Minister putting in place to make sure that our communities are safe?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, with a prison population in excess of 8,100, I have to advise Mr Eagle with respect that there is nothing soft about our justice system, but the reality is our justice system could certainly be smarter in terms of rehabilitating people and getting that shift where appropriate from the use of custody to the use of custody disposals. As I said in my original answer, that it is many decades now since adding additional days to someone's sentence. That ceased more than 20 years ago. We have to remember that our prison rules are subject to legal challenge, but nonetheless they are always kept under review. And it is important to recognise that with the correct planning that took place both with this piece of legislation and with the earlier emergency release provision, that the return to custody rates were certainly lower than reconviction rates.
And briefly, Audrey Nicholl.
Thank you. Can the Cabinet Secretary provide an update on what assessment has been made thus far of the impact of the Prisoners Early Release Scotland Act on relieving some of the acute pressures currently being experienced in our prison estate?
Presiding Officer, the implementation of changes to the short-term release point made by the Prisoners Early Release Scotland Act 2025 resulted in the release of 312 individuals, and the Act will have a sustained impact, with the sentence population expected to be around 5% lower than it would otherwise have been. And taking this action was essential to support the health and well-being of those working and living within the prison estate, and the implementation of the Act has eased some of the immediate pressures in our prison. However, the population remains at a high level, and this is only one of a range of actions to get a more sustainable approach to the use of custody.
Question 3, Claire Baker.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking, including through work involving Police Scotland and local authorities, to address antisocial behaviour in Mid Scotland and Fife.
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We are committed to support Police Scotland and local authorities who lead local responses to antisocial behaviour involving prevention, intervention and enforcement. This enables a partnership approach focusing on community safety as a whole and taking into account the local need as well. I recognise the impact of antisocial behaviour can have on local communities, which is why we have increased police funding for a record $1.62 billion this year. In addition, through our Cashback for Communities, we have provided £130 million since 2008 to support young people most at risk of being involved in violence, antisocial behaviour and crime. For example, between 2023 and 2024, £354,462 was invested in diversionary work with young people in the Fife Council area.
Claire Baker.
Thank you. The Minister may be aware of a number of recent reports of fire raising in Fife. Over 100 deliberate fires were recorded in March, with more incidents taking place through April. And in the course of one day, 7 deliberate fires were started, despite the extreme risk warning for wildfires that was in place. This fire raising creates huge risk of endangerment and damage to property, and the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service have said the increase has put a needless drain on resources. I do know that local work is taking place between the police and fire services in terms of high visibility patrols and engagement with local schools, but can I ask how the Scottish Government is engaging with local services to ensure they are properly resourced and supported in this work, and how is it ensuring its approach to addressing antisocial behaviour is able to respond to these local challenges?
Minister.
Thank you. I very much recognise the impact directed on these communities, especially with antisocial behaviour, but in particular the issue that fire raising that Claire Baker has raised here. I engage very often with Scottish Fire Rescue with that underneath my portfolio remit. It hasn't specifically been raised with me in these meetings yet, although we do, with our at the moment, what's happening is with the Independent Working Group on Antisocial Behaviour report was published back in February this year, and myself, COSLA and Police Scotland are all working together to seeing how we can implement the recommendations from that report to tackle all types of antisocial behaviour.
Question 4, Evelyn Tweed.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what steps are being taken to prevent young people from becoming involved in gang-related activity.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, we have invested more than £6 million over 3 years to support the implementation of the Violence Prevention Framework. This includes supporting medics against violence to engage with young people on the consequences of violence, and YouthLink Scotland to deliver No Knives, Better Lives training to hundreds of practitioners and young people across Scotland. Through Cashback for Communities, we have provided £130 million since 2008 to support young people who are most at risk at being involved in violence, antisocial behaviour or crime. And to date, the programme has reached around 1.3 million young people in Scotland.
Evelyn Tweed.
I thank the Justice Secretary for that answer. Organisations across Scotland are working hard to tackle the root causes of the rise in gang-related activity. What steps are the Government taking to support these organisations working in this area to collaborate, strategise and share learning? Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I'm very thankful to the multiple organisations working extremely hard at a national and local level to tackle the root causes of gang-related activity. The organisations we are funding through the Violence Prevention Framework are working with local communities and multiple organisations. And this includes place-based work in the, undertaken by the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit in Edinburgh, Fife, Glasgow. YouthLink Scotland work to coordinate and deliver the No Lives Better Lives training and resources to support, crucially, frontline practitioners, as well as the delivery of the Medics Against Violence Navigator programme, which helps individuals and families access the services they need. And the learning from this work is, of course, shared with others.
Question 8, Ben McPherson.
Scottish Government how it is working with partners to tackle gang-related violence.
Cabinet Secretary.
Crime, sorry.
Presiding Officer, disrupting organised crime groups, diverting individuals away from organised crime and reducing the harm caused by organised crime to individuals, communities and organisations remains a priority for the Scottish Government and its partners. Partnership working is a crucial part of the approach to organised crime as set out in Scotland's Serious Organised Crime Strategy. The Serious Organised Crime Task Force, which I chair, brings together law enforcement partners and representatives from the public, private and third sectors. And the Scottish Crime Campus at Gartcosh enhances collaboration between key partner organisations in detecting and disrupting serious organised crime and terrorism.
Ben Macpherson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer and all of that ongoing and important and impactful work that is taking place. Parliament will be aware of the reports in recent weeks and months of the very serious situation here in central Scotland, including in my constituency, with targeted instances of organised crime and related to gang violence. Police Scotland and Edinburgh are doing a remarkable job, and I pay tribute to them, and I thank them for their actions and the updates. However, it's all part of a concern that I've had for some months of the number of young people who are getting involved in gang-related crime in my constituency, in this city and across central Scotland. So building on the investment that was stated in a previous answer and cashback, is there any more resource that can be provided for youth work providers in this really difficult time at the moment?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, indeed, Presiding Officer, it's an important point raised by the member, and it is crucial, as he has done, to reinforce the message that has been given by Police Scotland to the people of Edinburgh and elsewhere, that Police Scotland are indeed in pursuit of criminals. They are being tracked down, they are on it, they have made arrests. I can't say anything more about live proceedings, and it's crucial that the police have our full support, because although they will always rise to the challenge, everyone needs to be playing their part to provide information to the police. People can of course do this anonymously via Crime Stoppers, but it's also crucial that other agencies, multi-agencies, are focused on prevention. And I've already mentioned the Cashback for Communities programme. There are many other programmes that are active in the Edinburgh area, and I would be happy to provide information to Mr Macpherson or any other member. But Cashback is currently supporting 16 projects and helping over 3,000 young people in Edinburgh.
Thank you. Brief supplementary, Sharon Dowie.
Thank you. Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government treats criminals under the age of 25 with kid gloves, however serious their crimes are. But senior police officers have said that criminal gangs are exploiting this. At the recent summit, young people themselves said actions should have consequences regardless of age. So will the Scottish Government reconsider its attitude to criminals under the age of 25 and scrap their two-tier sentencing guidelines?
And briefly, Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as I have probably said for the umpteenth time to Ms Dowie, it's imperative, particularly with our young people, that we take approaches, and we see that with the Independent Sentencing Council, approaches that are based on evidence and what will actually work to deter our young people. And I would have hoped that Ms Dowie could join this government in condemning the criminal exploitation of our children. These are offences and the exploitation of our children that is somewhat hidden, it is somewhat underreported, and it is very clear to me and others that some of our young people are being exploited by serious organised crime, and they are viewed as disposable resources, and it's imperative that we all stand together to combat the exploitation of our children for criminal purposes.
Question 5, Mark Ruskell.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on what the timescale is to adapt the HMP Stirling estate to address the ongoing noise complaints, in light of reports from residents that the noise disturbance is getting worse.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I am aware that the member attended a constructive meeting at HMP and YOI Stirling on the 24th of March to discuss this matter directly with SPS senior officials, during which SPS provided a comprehensive update on solutions. Scottish Prison Service proposals are now in the full and final stage and will change how particular rooms have access to fresh air. A timeline for the project is now being developed and will be shared with the member and other local representatives, including the Local Residents Association, as soon as possible. SPS will then seek final comments prior to submitting formal planning permission with the local council.
Ruskell.
Well, can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response? I absolutely welcome the work that SPS staff do at HMP Stirling. That is not in question at all. But the quality of the building absolutely is. There needs to be an absolute cut in that noise disturbance. I have 3 constituents who've sold houses as a result of this in recent months, others that have declining mental health, others that have simply given up because they don't believe that this change is coming, Cabinet Secretary. So can the Cabinet Secretary ensure that this programme will be accelerated, that the trial noise reduction measures will be put in place immediately, that the planning application to make the measures permanent will be lodged immediately, and that the completion of the project, with a clear date for the completion of the project, will be provided as she's already outlined?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, can I just express my ongoing appreciation to the member and also to other MSPs, Mr Stewart, and indeed the constituency MSP, Mr Brown, for pursuing this issue, but doing so constructively and with sensitivity. If I can just reassure him, after portfolio questions, I will indeed be meeting with the Chief Executive of the Scottish Prison Service, and this is a matter that we discuss regularly.
Question 6, Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government regarding its work in antisocial behaviour, what discussions it has had with the UK Government about tackling the misuse of e-bikes?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I completely understand the concerns over the misuse of e-bikes and other vehicles, and we are committed to collaborating with the UK Government where we can. I have therefore asked for work to be taken forward as a priority to develop a cross-party approach to the UK Government about how we can do more to work together to tackle antisocial behaviour involving vehicles. We are also committed to supporting the police to tackle these issues, including providing record funding of £1.62 billion to Police Scotland for 2025 to 2026 to enhance their response.
Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This is the second time I've raised this issue in the past couple of months because I'm really concerned about antisocial behaviour in my own city, but also elsewhere. And the UK Government's inactivity in dealing with this increasing problem of antisocial behaviour of e-bike users is galling. And I'm afraid that their intransigists may lead to serious injury or even death. Has the Scottish Government asked the UK Government if they will consider a licensing scheme to control e-bike usage?
Minister.
Thank you. Antisocial behaviour involving vehicles is a shared challenge across the whole of the UK, and with some powers, including vehicle licensing, are reserved. We are committed to working with the UK Government to improve community safety and to achieve our shared goal. E-bikes exceeding 250 watts or 15.5 miles per hour are classified as motor vehicles and require a driving licence, insurance and vehicle tax. Privately owned e-scooters cannot be legally used on public roads or pavements in Scotland, and off-road vehicles like quad bikes are also required for a licence to use on public roads. While the Scottish Government has not so far specifically requested an additional licensing scheme for e-bikes, I recognise that there are calls for further legislation, and that's why I am keen to work with the UK Government on a cross-party basis to explore practical solutions. I know the member says he has raised this twice. I know several members in this chamber have, and myself and Jim Fairley have set up a group with interested MSPs, and I am happy to invite the member to the next meeting.
Very brief supplementary, Sue Webber.
Any e-bike that doesn't meet the electrically pedal-assisted cycle requirements, as you stated, Minister, is classified as a motorcycle or a moped, and that requires that it be registered, taxed, and the rider requires a valid licence and must wear a helmet. But we've seen some of these e-bikes exceed the speeds and are not becoming those electrically pedal-assisted cycles and perhaps be classified as mopeds.
Jim.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Minister outline how how you are working with Police Scotland to ensure that e-bikes that do not meet EPAC are being seized by...
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I assure the member that we support Police Scotland and its partners in dealing with the misuse of vehicles? Enforcement is a matter for Police Scotland, and local policing teams are best identified to identify misuse and work to prevent future incidents. Police have the powers to enforce the law using public disorder or dispersal powers. And as I said, I think I have reached out to the member to be part of the group for off-road vehicles with other MSPs as well.
Question 7, Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it's taking in response to reports of criminals using drones to infiltrate prisons.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the use of drones to introduce illicit items into our prison estate is a current and credible threat, and it's one which the Scottish Prison Service and myself are taking very seriously. I am pleased to inform the member that the Scottish Prison Service have been trialling preventative measures to negate the risk presented by drones and are evaluating their effectiveness before finalising a targeted approach to this clear and obvious threat to safety within our prisons.
Alexander Stewart.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. Details obtained from prisons show that criminals are increasingly using state-of-the-art technology to avoid security. One drone was found full of mobile phone SIM cards, syringes, needles, together with tablets and suspected drugs. Violence amongst inmates will be an inevitable consequence of these drone deliveries. So what action can be put in place to ensure that the lives of hard-working prison officers are protected because of this?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, it's a fair and valid point. If I can perhaps just point to 3 specific actions amongst many. There are measures to improve infrastructure, such as the piloting of the implementation of new window grills in some of our larger establishments. There is also targeted reactive measures, which will pilot covert technology to detect when a drone is approaching or entering SPS airspace. And there is also the drone detection pilot called D-Drone that ended earlier this year, and SPS are currently exploring other software and technologies on the market.
Thank you. That concludes portfolio questions on justice and home affairs. There will be a brief pause before we move to the next item to allow front benches to change.